Uè bella gente, questo episodio è in inglese, so switch language. And we're back, online from New York City. Hi everyone, how's it going? This is Giacomo Baldelli, and this is Chiamo Dopo, my podcast. Welcome to it. Chiamo Dopo stands for I'll talk to you later, and this is our episode number 125. Why am I saying these things to you right now like you don't know what I'm talking about? Well, this is the beginning of our 7th season, and we decided to inaugurate today a new series of episodes completely in English. That's a matter of fact that this is our very first episode completely in English. Each episode of Chiamo Dopo is a phone call that I make from New York City, where I live, to, well, up to this point it was mostly to my country, Italy. And I've been talking to a lot of musicians, writers, actors, directors, artists in general. And they're like chats to give them a safe space to share their story and to get to know them a little bit better. If you're new and you've never heard about our show before, please don't forget to follow us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on Spreaker, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Also, don't forget to take a look at our social media. We are on Instagram, we are on Facebook, we are on Patreon if you want to support us. You just have to look up Chiamo Dopo. Chiamo Dopo is spelled Chiamodopo. I think I could win the spelling bee for this. But let's move on now and introduce our guest today. You have no idea how happy and honored I am to start this new series of episodes with Mr. Olly Knights, Turin Brakes. It was great talking to him. Great guy, sweet guy, and we had the chance to talk about their new work. Turin Brakes are out now with a new album called Wide-Eyed Nowhere. We talked about it, and we also talked about the fact that, thank God, they're back on the road with a series of concerts. Awesome. And after we talked, I saw that they even dropped a few dates in my country, in Italy, for 2023. They're gonna start, of course, there in Turin, in Torino. But I also saw that they're gonna be in the town next to my hometown, in Bologna, and I'm not gonna be able to attend because I'm gonna be here in New York. Anyways, fingers crossed. Maybe at some point soon they're gonna visit this country as well. I really hope so. Anyways, it was great talking to him. I even had a couple of questions that I kept inside of me for like 20 years about their first album, the Optimist LP, an album that I fell in love with. It was just like a great chat. So this is me talking to Olly Knights, Turin Brakes.
Talk to you later.
So you're talking to me from home, right? Which is?
Yeah, so I'm talking to you from southwest London, a place called Turin, which is, southwest London, and I've lived around here pretty much my whole life. So I've stayed in the same kind of bit of London. So so that's where I'm talking to you from.
Okay, and you are on a break from the tour, am I right?
Yeah, so I think we've got about 10 days between this section that we just finished.
Okay.
And the next section.
So this is like a tour to support the new album, right? Which is Wide-Eyed Nowhere. I would really like to go to talk a little bit about the past, but since we're here, can we like spend a few minutes to talk about this new album and the tour? Because is this the first, let's say, series of concerts that you guys have been having since the world changed?
So we did manage to do some shows for the Optimist that was 20 years old last year at kind of in between, like at the end of all the lockdowns and before the COVID number, when the COVID numbers in this country kind of dropped.
Okay.
So we managed to get back out for those shows that we'd already delayed for a whole year because so we managed to do that, but that was a very quick tour for us. That was only like a couple of weeks, whereas we're used to touring. I mean, most of the time now we'll tour for months, you know.
Yeah, right.
So this is the first time that we've kind of properly toured and really gone back on the road in oh man, it must be like 3 years or something,
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
crazy,
No,
crazy for us.
it's up. I mean, it's great. You know that when people ask me, how old are you, right? For some reason, I skip a few years, but not because I want to pretend to be younger, but it's because, I mean, that there was, especially that year, like mid 2020, mid 2021, which is like the last time I took the subway here in New York, it was March 13, 2020, and the second time that year was like the 31st of 2021. So it's like a year that I spent inside at my place. It makes our thoughts about time like kind of like expanded somehow. You know, you're like, oh, I'm 38. No, fuck, I'm 39. No, I'm 40 because I actually lived that year. But, you know, I just like wasted a year somehow. And so...
It's a conversation I've had a few times recently with people where people's idea of time has changed slightly because of basically we kind of skipped over a year together.
Exactly.
Which is very, very strange. I think for the adults it's weird. For people who are like in their teens and like young people, it's more than weird. It's just terrible because that part of your life every year is huge.
Yeah,
you know,
it's like 1/5 of your age, or like 1/4 of your age. You know.
Yeah, and you need those moments to become the adult that you're gonna become, and I think it will be really obvious in time how younger people really missed something very, very big. You know, and there's a lot of mental health crisis going on, certainly in the UK, and I bet all over the place.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Talk to you later.
We're talking about like these past 2 years that have been like so weird for everybody. So like the new album was like something that was actually conceived in the past 2 years. I mean, there's one song of the new album, which is Isolation, that like brings me to think that at least part of the material might have been like, you know, written in isolation, you know, during the lockdown. Yeah. It's a coincidence, or there's some truth behind it?
Yeah, you know what? It's a total coincidence.
Oh.
And I'm not just saying it. It really was written. Almost every song on this album was written in about 2018. So before COVID even existed, or before we knew about it. And it's very strange that we called a song Isolation, and then isolation took on a new meaning with COVID. But the isolation in the song is more like a kind of personal isolation, and almost somebody longing to be in isolation, sort of like needing that kind of space that you get when you're maybe a bit of an introvert and you just need to be alone, and you kind of weirdly are longing for it. It's a strange part of existence that I think some humans really need. Isolation. But then the term isolation completely changed with COVID, and everyone sees it as a COVID thing. But funnily enough, it is a coincidence, and the song has nothing to do really specifically with COVID, and in fact none of the album does, which is weird because when you listen to it in post-COVID times, it kind of sounds like it's about some of it.
Yeah,
but it really isn't. It's funny.
Talk to you later.
You mentioned this theme that, correct me if I'm wrong, it's kind of like something that pops up often, you know, in your work, in your production, this theme of looking to the inside of you, you know, like personal themes. And do you see this kind of point of view as a trait of your songwriting throughout the years, like talking about your feelings and your emotions, or not?
Yeah, I think it's something that I guess I've become more conscious of as we've gone along, but I think it is a trait for sure.
Yeah.
That the work, like for some reason the music that we make and the songs that we often write, and especially the songs that I write, they seem to be more concerned with a kind of a rich internal world, maybe a little more, not more than the outside world, but at least in a kind of equal fashion as the external world. I find like talking about the weather inside, the weather inside you, and what's happening there. It's a very rich place to go, and there's always a song to come out. And I talk a lot about pulling things out, like coming out of a well, or pulling a rabbit out of a hat is a lyric that I used on the song Isolation. And it's this, I guess, a visual image or a metaphor in some ways of pulling things from the inside out, and how that can be almost like being a magician sometimes. You pull something from the inside and you pull it out, and it's like, wow, what's this? And there's this whole world going on inside there. I remember we did a lyric. I guess I was very conscious when I wrote that there was a lyric on an album a few years ago that we made where I said, can we turn the telescope from the stars to within? So like turn the telescope around, and maybe that's more interesting than trying to go to Mars. So in some ways, there's a lot more going on in there that we don't know about out there. So I've always kind of liked that. I just find that very inspiring, and that there's a lot of stuff in there to come out that can be helpful to help you with the world outside.
Yeah. Do you happen by any chance are you an only child?
No, I have an older sister. So
okay.
There's two of us.
Okay, because, I mean, being an only child myself, I mean, a lot of things that you were talking about, like they resonate, with my own experience. And so I was like, kind of like wondering if, you were in the same position, because that's the kind of like spending a lot of time alone, like being a lot in your thoughts, more than sometimes others. It's I believe it's something that I can find in a lot of only children.
I can totally see why you say that, and I think because there was an age gap, and my sister was female and I was a boy and she was a girl, I definitely spent a lot of time reflecting and on my own as a child, for sure, and had a very rich kind of imaginative world that I would live in. And of course, this was before the invention of the smartphone and the internet. So there was a lot more, I mean, I spent 90% of my childhood was sheer boredom. And I would invent worlds.
Exactly. Yeah,
all the time. And I think it's something that you know about, and people of a certain age, I guess, maybe have that, had to do that or had no choice. Whereas I look at I have two teenage daughters, and I sometimes I have conversations where I say to them, I look at you guys, and in some ways I'm jealous because you have these smartphones. You don't really know what true boredom is. And they don't, because
yes, exactly.
because they can always distract themselves all the time. Even if it's kind of in a very shallow way, you can always distract yourself now. Whereas, before smartphones, you really knew what deep boredom was.
Absolutely.
And the funny thing is that deep boredom, in the end, that's where creativity comes from, and you can really invent stuff, but you have to be able to go a long way down the rabbit hole, so I wonder, how, it's going to be interesting to see how the humans change, and they already are changing for sure. Not always in a bad way, but just they're definitely going to be. I think they're going to be different. There's a very unique change that came with the internet.
Talk to you later.
About the new album that, I love, and I really like Into the Sun, which brings me to this question. In this album, I kind of find a lot of mix between a mix of a bunch of material and styles that you guys have been experiencing in the past. There's a lot of acoustic stuff. There's some gentle electronics here and there. There's always a super solid songwriting. And I would like to ask you if it's a correct, let's say, analysis of the sound of the album, and also what kind of inspiration influences were like in play, for the writing of this new work.
Yeah, no, good questions. I mean, I think in terms of correct analysis, whatever your analysis is correct.
Okay.
I never think that we hold the answers to our records. We make them, and then we put them out, and then they are whatever the hell people interpret them to be. Yeah. People's perception of them is exactly what they are. So I'm always fascinated by other people's perception of the things we make, because I feel like I'll learn more about what we've made if I listen to what people say they think they are, as opposed to insisting, that they're this or they're that. So I'm kind of, it's good to hear in a way that you feel that we've weaved a lot of the different influences that we've had going on, I guess, over the 20 plus years that we've been together. I'm kind of not surprised in a way. It kind of makes sense that should happen. But I think the way we made this record was so I don't want to use the word natural, but okay. I can't think of another word.
Okay, that's a natural. Is good.
It was very unhurried and kind of we weren't even too conscious of it being like this super effort to make this record. It was more like, here's some songs, let's keep carving over like a whole summertime, and see where it leads. So we let the music kind of really slowly push us along, whereas other records we've made, we'd be much more insistent on, we have 2 weeks in this studio, so we need to really come out with something finished. This time we almost used the kind of COVID type situation where you couldn't really rely on like booking a studio, because you never knew if that it was all going to get locked down again. So we used my studio at home instead, and we made it in a way like just like friends, like just friends coming together, hanging out, discussing, and layering up this album, and so there was probably more time for little experiments and little things that you might feel under too much pressure in a commercial studio to try out. So there's little swobbly synthesizers and things in this record that maybe we'd have just stuck to more of a rigid kind of classic Turin Brakes tempo. So I think there are things, and we are influenced. I mean, there's 4 of us in this band, really, especially these days, and everyone has everyone's pulling in influences from all over the place. I mean, our bass player Ed, he's a really accomplished jazz musician. He's super busy in the jazz world, and does a really kind of progressive, interesting things in that world. So he's, I would say, musically, he's like an intellectual. He's like a heavyweight intellectual, as well as being just a naturally very gifted musician. Yeah. He's got a real big brain on him, and he uses it with music. So that's always interesting to see how he's interpreting things and what he brings in. And Gail, on the other, Gail is like, he has a very diverse music taste, and he listens to as much sort of world music and electronic music, and so there's definitely there's so many things being pulled from outside. It's almost impossible to say exactly, and it's just a certain chemistry that we have when we get together. Certain things get through the barriers, and I guess that's the magic of every band has a unique chemistry, and there's definitely one that we have, and we've managed to. The biggest thing is that we've managed to stay together. The same 4 people since.
Yeah, exactly.
For such a long time, and that yeah, that can allow you to build a language that's very deep over many years, you know.
And it's very specific and unique. So even if they're like, let's say, like detours from the main trajectory, it's you, you know, and it's kind of like very specific of Turin Brakes, you know, if it makes sense. I mean, you can play around that like main trajectory, but you're still yourself, you know. And probably this is also like the beauty of it, you know.
Talk to you later.
There's one thing that I would like to share with you, okay? And I would like to introduce like a little bit of your past, if it's okay.
Sure.
So, long story short, a few months ago, something bad happened to me. I unfortunately lost my best friend. And it was like something, it was sudden. It was like, I'm still processing all of it. But, you know, we had projects together. I'm a musician. I play mostly, you know, avant-garde music, you know, classical contemporary music. This is the kind of stuff. I'm a guitarist. And he is a scientist. Okay, so we are completely worlds apart, but like music was the thing that, you know, brought us together, you know, and helped us, you know, growing up. Okay.
Yeah.
And so we had this project, which was, I was supposed to start to write a new book. And he was like, you know, if you do a new book, I want to help you. We got to do this thing together. Of course, I cannot write a book with him anymore, but I'm writing it, and it's about like albums that changed our lives. So it's about like the albums that, you know, helped us to become friends and be best friends. And one of them is the Optimist LP. So that album hit me in a very specific time of my life, which is probably you're not familiar with the Italian, you know, school system. Okay. But we do like 5 years of high school. I don't know if it's the same in UK. Here in the US, it's 4 years for some reason. And, I bought that album. I went to the local, you know, record store. It was imported because you couldn't find it like in the mega store, of course. And it was right before the final exam of high school. So for me, that album is the soundtrack of me growing up, you know, because it was in such a specific time. So I would like to ask you, and in part you've already like talked about this, but when I listened to that album, I remember that I was like, oh my God, I have no idea what he's talking about in this song. Mm-hmm. But it talks to me somehow, you know? Mm-hmm. So how important is for you to give room to the listener to make like to put their own lives, you know, in the songs, to like not do something like, okay, it's not a script, so to speak. It's not like I'm telling you what's happening. I'm just giving you like thoughts, images, things. Do you recognize this kind of like style in your way of working?
Well, you're the first person. I've been sort of trying to find ways to explain that process for, you know, my whole 23 years plus. And I think I genuinely mean this. I think you're the first person to so eloquently say it back to me in all that time, because. And first of all, let me say I'm very sorry to hear about your friend. That's terrible. And I know I've had some experiences similar to that, and I know how strange and difficult it is to rebuild your sort of identity when you've been with when it's so joined up with somebody else. Right? And that's really tough. But I'm very glad that the music it can help. But it's very interesting what you say about the kind of ambiguity of Turin Brakes. I do think we specialize in that. And sometimes it can be frustrating. Like some people, I had a message from somebody, I think it was an American fan about maybe 2 years ago. And she was almost angry. She was like, why do you never say what your songs are about? Why don't you, like in interviews and things, why aren't you more specific? Why don't you say exactly what this is supposed to be inspired by, or what it's all about? And I respect her. It's like, yeah, I can see why that might annoy you if you are looking to be led. If you are looking for a story, maybe you've grown up being told stories in a very, very strict way, or
linear way.
A linear way that has to be this narrative. A, B, C, D.
Exactly.
I understand that, and I can see how it could maybe, in some ways, not work for everyone. But there's something very important that I experienced before signing a record deal. I went to university in a place called Central St. Martin's, which is it's kind of quite a fancy art school in the center of London. Okay. And I did a course called the Film and Video course, and at the time it was quite sort of a famous course, and it was very, very, very anti-narrative, very anti-Hollywood, super experimental, and an anti-narrative. The whole point was to tear narratives apart, to decouple filmmaking with story. The idea was that, look, stories are great, but they're for, you can find them in books, you can sit around a campfire and tell each other stories. That's great. But film, there's another way to do this, and there's a more, maybe a deeper or a way that can some new depth can come. So that I learned how to make films. They were kind of structural films, very experimental, and that's what I did for like three or even nearly 4 years before we signed a record deal. So during that time, me and Gail made music for the films, because there was no internet, so there was no library music you could download. So we had to make
libraries, sound libraries.
We had to make all these kind of experimental pieces of music, and weirdly, sometimes we'd do like a folk song in the middle of it, just for fun, just because we kind of couldn't help ourselves. And that's exactly where Turin Brakes was born, out of that kind of sense of a little bit of experimental feeling about it. So that's the way I think of songwriting. I never want to pin down something in this kind of linear narrative, because to me it's done. Other people do that, and other people do it better than me. Bob Dylan, whoever. People can do this stuff really well, and it's been done so well. I'm not gonna even, that's not my space. Do you know what I mean? I'm not even interested in that at all. I find it much more fascinating and almost magic when you kind of can make something almost out of nothing, and meaning can come, one ambiguous line meets another ambiguous line, and strangely it creates a unique third meaning. These two sums are put together, and they equal this crazy number, and those crazy numbers, man, they set off like fireworks in my head when they're interesting.
I'm just like thinking, now that you're talking about this, I'm thinking about like Feeling Oblivion, where basically there was this like whole thing, like, which is basically like friends just like wandering around at night on a car, right? And I've done that multiple times. I come from a small town, and back in the day when there was nothing else to do, you used to do that, just like going around like for no reason. And you went like at the end of the night and like, so what have we done? I don't know, but it was great. It's kind of stuff like I have no idea. And sometimes it's just a feeling. It's just like an atmosphere, that resonates with you more than like, okay, this is the story, as you said, ABC.
Yeah, no, I totally feel what you're saying. I completely agree.
Talk to you later.
10 years ago with my band, because for 10 years I had a parallel career in rock music, we used to cover Underdog. Okay. We used to do that, and we did it also in an electric way. Okay. So it was kind of more intense, but there were other songs in the album, Emergency 72 or Future Boy. Okay. Which, if I listen to them now that, I quit that life and I'm full on weird noises and experimental music, and it always brought me to think these two guys, I think, because back then I think that the writing process was you and Gail, if I'm correct. I mean, they must have had a lot of time just to try things. And because experimental music, it's not just the one that you study at the music conservatory. It's also just being in a bedroom and trying things together and see what happens. And so, was there a lot of that in your writing? Film music that also can become a folk song and stuff like that, or were you guys completely free and without specific rules? Okay.
We were, they kind of, there's that kind of classic quote where you say you have your whole life to make your first album.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
After that you have nothing. But me and Gail, we've known each other since we were little kids. We went to the same school. We hung out all the time. Our lives are infused with each other. There's no getting away from it. We are like each other's shadows, really. And so there was a huge amount of time to experiment, to reference, to get things wrong, to get to go the wrong way. So for sure, I think that probably shows certainly on that first record. I think you probably pick up on that. What kind of amazes me in some ways about what we managed to do is somehow we took all of these quite experimental kind of random methods and ways to make music, and yet somehow managed to live in the world of pop music. Turin Brakes had some commercial success and were played on the radio and were part of some music scenes in the early 2000s, and somehow it still managed to translate into the mainstream of things. And in a way that's kind of amazing. When I look back, I kind of think, wow, because really it didn't have any right to do that. It could have so easily stayed something much more underground and much more of a cult thing, but somehow it just crossed into the world of pop. And in some ways I love that. It's even more interesting for me that that you can take two completely opposing kind of things and yet they work. Maybe we just got lucky. I think that's part of it. But also we grew up listening to pop when we were kids. So it's not that we're running away from the mainstream of things. It's more that I think we always loved the idea of bringing something to it, from the outside. So being outsiders, being interested in outsider music, outsider cinema, everything that's just a little outside of the mainstream, but then taking it and bringing it in, showing it to a bigger audience and hopefully delighting them in some way and pushing things forwards, and that was our biggest plan was, look, let's get, let's play a crazy like acoustic guitar solo on this song called Underdog.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing that you wouldn't normally hear very often,
exactly,
especially in the 2001,
Yeah.
And let's see if we can have that on the same radio station as like the most poppy or pop rock kind of stuff. Let's see if, wouldn't that be cool? And that's almost like just a little funny conversation. And sure enough,
it happened.
There's Underdog is played on Radio 1, and with me and Gail are in the back of a cab laughing and high-fiving and saying, how? This is so cool. It worked. Our crazy little plan, it worked. Yeah. So that's what's so nice about the Turin Brakes story in a way, is little funny things like that where we managed to make an impact on mainstream culture,
exactly,
but with these kind of pretty outside things,
Yeah.
Talk to you later.
I don't know if it's because, I technically grew up in the 90s, so I'm a child of the MTV Unplugged era, or because when you guys, I remember the first album, there was this huge article, and I actually mention it in my book about the new acoustic movement, and I said something like that new acoustic movement disappeared probably before we realized that it happened, and you guys were like thrown inside this thing, which, brings me to a bunch of like thoughts about music business and this kind of like media need of categorize music, of putting you inside of a specific drawer, which is something that it's a little bit silly if you think about what you guys have done. For some reason, though, like afterwards, in the years after, I mean, your work and this kind of approach that you just described of trying to create a sort of short circuit, in the mainstream thing, it reminds me a lot of the work that, for instance, Paul McCartney has done in his solo albums, those that he plays by himself, that are, yes, they're mainstream because it's Paul McCartney. But if you listen to like McCartney 1, 2, and also the last one, the third one, it's pretty out there, like in terms of like things. But still, it can speak to a big audience if the audience wants to listen to it, because that's the other part of it. So the one question that it's kind of like interesting to me. What is your relationship, since we entered this topic, with show business? Because you guys did this first album, it was great, and you won like prizes, awards for it. And then there was the second one that, correct me if I'm wrong, was the most successful one in terms of charts and things. So then you went back to be like super solid and established as like great songwriting, like great band, stuff that people like, but probably never able again to reach, certain charts, peaks. Do you care about this stuff? Like, is it something like that when it happened with the second album, you were like, okay, yes, great.
Yeah.
We got to be there. We got to stay there. Or you were like, if it stays like this, it's great. But if not, I'm going to go on with my life.
Yeah. Well, again, really interesting question. And we've spent our whole career, certainly that first half of our career, being split in two, almost like split personalities, where there was the original intention, which is, we do what we want to do no matter what. No matter what happens, we make the music that we are excited to make. And if it takes us away from success, that's the deal. Like, that's what being a real artist is. And you live or die by your art instinct, and I still, I guess really I still 100% believe that's true. But then there's another side, which is you're also just a human being. You're a kid, practically. We were practically kids when we first had all that success. We were in very early 20s at the time, and you want to you have suddenly a lot of success comes. People make a lot of money from the records you're selling, and there's people that you make friends with, and you kind of want them to be happy, and you want them to be excited, and you want the label to be like, whoa, we're selling out of your album so quick, this is amazing, we must, this is cool, give us more. And so you're cut in half, and it's very turbulent. It's a very stressful place to be, because half of you wants to be true to your art, and the other half is being a little manipulated by the success, and your ego begins to change, and you start to enjoy, I like this feeling of like winning. This is so addictive.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, it makes total sense.
So so it's a crazy ride, but I think you said it just now, you can see the second album was a big commercial success and was very exciting, and still felt artistically very strong, because we felt we'd won, because we got to make still quite an experimental kind of a record, really. When you listen to the song, the production is very layered, and there's a lot of interesting places where it goes musically. It's not really trying too hard to be easy listening, but it was commercially successful. So I think that was like our height of kind of the combination of art and commercial success. And then after that, I think we knew, even ourselves, that we thought, we can't keep going down that road, because if we go down that road any further, we won't be able to make the music we want to make. We could kind of tell that the label, if you're really successful for a couple of records, the label will start to build their structure around you. So you're no longer an outsider who's just come in and been really lucky and wonderful, and it's all lovely and new. You're now in the center, and they're building this kind of tower around you, and they need you to keep giving them the stuff that they can make work for the mainstream of things. And that's not the same thing as being just in a band with your friend and being experimenting and messing around and saying to hell with it, we'll do this until we can't do it anymore, is a very different thing. And we could see that happening on after the second record. It was like, if this gets any bigger, we can't do it the way we like, and actually it becomes a very different thing. So we did retreat. We retreated on that third album, Jack in a Box. In some ways it's quite a poppy record. It's a very summery, easy breezy record in some ways, but we made it in a way. We went back to just me and Gail, and we made it alone, and we made it cheap. We didn't spend loads of money on it, and we purposefully tried to make, I think, a smaller record, something that we would prefer as fans ourselves, and not make something that was just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, because Turin Brakes is there's a lot of subtlety, and it's delicate, and if you get bigger and bigger and bigger, where you're kind of like competing with Coldplay and bands like that, it's not Turin. The charm and the special thing about Turin Brakes, it's just gone at that point. You can't. So we decided to try our best to
maintain
that.
To protect that. I mean, because in the end, you guys are underdogs for real. Like somehow it's the kind of like outsiders kind of thing that you're not expecting them, those people that you're not expecting them to win something.
Yeah.
But when they do, you're happier for some
Yeah.
reason, because that's what we are most of the time. Like, it's what, ordinary people. I mean, we would like to be like those that nobody thinks of, but they do like things in a way, they have that spark at some moment, in the moment that makes them the winners. And it would be nice to be that,
Yeah.
And I am back. How was it? Did you like it? Did you like it? I really hope so. Man, what an honor. What a great honor to have Olly Knights from Turin Brakes on our show today. It was great. It was awesome. Best of luck to Olly, and best of luck to the entire Turin Brakes family and crew. You guys, don't forget, the Turin Brakes are out now with a new album, Wide-Eyed Nowhere. Listen to it. Buy it. And also, don't forget to take a look at their website, turinbrakes.com, for their tour dates. And if you liked this episode, please stick around. Don't go away. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, on Facebook, and click that following button on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. This way, when we're going to drop a new English episode, you will be there. I believe this is it. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you later.
Talk to you later.